So if you don't know who Vaush is, he's basically like the #1 left-wing Breadtuber on the internet, if I'm not mistaken. I believe he's a communist or whatever. But he has had some very kind of suspicious and weird and frankly disgusting takes when it comes to things like pedophilia and child porn, which shouldn't be surprising for literally anyone who's on the left remotely. And we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. But we found a clip this week regarding Vaush that, side by side, you put them together. It's actually quite incriminating. And we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. But first, I want to before I show this, I want to give context of why the whole Vaush child porn question has been so controversial. I believe this was about last year, maybe about like a year and a half ago. Vaush said something regarding child porn that, obviously blew the internet up. And I'll show you in a second and we'll talk about it. But even like his own fan base kind of came after him for this, which is honestly kind of, well, I'll talk about it in a little bit. But, like I said, it shouldn't be surprising to you that anyone on the left kind of subscribes to these ideas eventually, because it is the end result of leftism and sexual anarchy, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But I want to give you guys the context before we begin kind of reacting to the main clip tonight. So this is kind of who Vaush is on the question of child porn, okay? Just so we can be clear here.
Should consuming child porn be legal? I think that would be, yes, more legal and more ethically consistent. Yes, 100%.
Okay, so did you get that? So you got what he said? Okay, so this is a guy who does believe that child pornography, or at least the possession of child pornography or the consumption of child pornography, should be legal, okay? Keep in mind, this is not like some weirdo. This guy's platformed on YouTube. He's boosted by, it's not like the right-wing YouTubers that these guys boosted on YouTube, platformed a big time. And, mainstream guy, you could say in many ways on the left. And this is his take. And we're going to continue to kind of show you how he stands on this stuff. All right.
Still don't care. I still think that like zoophile porn, like drawn stuff, it should be 100% legal. In fact, and this is going to be a real hot take, I have yet to hear a convincing moral or legal argument as to why possession of child pornography should be illegal.
So, let me just say, when you watch these clips, before we get into the main thing tonight, it shouldn't be surprising that, let's just say there seems to be indication that he does have something of a liking or whatever for child porn or things like child porn, because the truth is always somewhere in between, and sometimes the truth is like all the way onto that side where, if he's kind of taking the stand on this, you kind of have to ask the question, like, why is that? Like, what is his relationship to these things? But so I just want to give the context that this is kind of who he is, and this has always been like, I don't know, something that people have come after him for, and that's what it is. Okay, so I would like to point out though that I think most people look at these opinions and what he's saying here, and they're like, this guy is crazy. I think like most moderate people, even a lot of people on the left, like a lot of his fans have came after him for what he said here, right? I think it's important to understand that this literally just simply is the result of allowing what I guess you could call sexual anarchy to reign, okay? And what I mean by that is that basically for most of Western civilization, and this is a point that I really want to drive home to a lot of conservatives especially, because there is this tendency within the conservative movement, especially when it comes to like sexual questions, to basically just say, well, can't we just go back to the way things were like 10 to 20 years ago, whatever? It's like, like, for example, you look at the question of LGBT. It's like, I'm okay with them marrying. I really don't even care if they like shove it in my face necessarily. It used to be just don't shove it in my face. Now it's like, you know what? You can't shove it in my face. Just don't shove it in my children's faces, please. Like that's kind of where the slippery slope is going on this. And there's this other tendency, I guess you could say, like when you look at the modern feminist culture or whatever, it's like, it's crazy nowadays. I wish we could just go back to like the hookup style culture of like the 2000s and that's better or whatever. I think, so with that being said, I think it's important to understand that no, there's no point in which this stuff changes or whatever. It will always march to this end point, and it is the result of sexual anarchy. And that basically is what happens when you abandon objective moral standards when it comes to the question of sex. And that's to say that, for 1500 plus years in Western history, there was an objective standard when it came to sex, and it was influenced and it was based off of Christianity, right? So the Christian moral standard when it comes to sex is a gift from God between man and a woman, and to be had within the context of marriage, and marriage itself is a union of flesh between a man and a woman, but that's it, right? It's a very, you could say it's a very rigid standard or whatever, and I know that even a lot of conservatives nowadays look at that, which is straight out of the Bible. It's not like something that I'm making up on my own. Even a lot of conservatives nowadays look at that and they think that's like kind of crazy because they've been conditioned by the sexual revolution or whatever itself, right? But this standard is objective. It is concrete. It comes from somewhere. But of course, what has happened over the course of the sexual revolution, right, is that basically that objective standard, gift between a man and a woman in the context of marriage, only between a husband and a wife, it's a pretty grave sin to, commit fornication, which is basically just sex outside of marriage, adultery, etc. Well, what happens in the 1960s, and you could maybe argue sometimes prior, and by the way, let me just say, that is a standard that not everyone followed. Like, that part is true, because I know people are going to be like, well, not everyone did that. That is true, but it's also true that on a societal level, this was kind of the considered standard. And when people broke this rule, they kind of broke the Christian moral standard on this topic, right? It was something they did in private, right? It was something they tried to hide from everyone, right? As opposed to like shout it off a rooftop like they are now, whereas now it's like basically promoted and it is the norm in society, and you're encouraged to do it like that, right? So that's important to point out. But what happens in the 1960s, basically, you have the sexual revolution come along, and you have these kind of new ideas around sex, basically that, it's not like this gift from God between you and your spouse in the context of marriage. It's kind of just like this fun thing, and, do it when you're ready. How often have you heard that nowadays when it comes to sex? It's like, I'm not saying do it when you feel like you're ready. Have fun, live your life, and like the most kind of moral stance you get is like, well, are you sure you're ready? Like, that's all they say. It's not like, no, this is what sex is for, right? It's more so of this like subjective standard of like, are you ready for it? I'll just do it when I feel like I'm comfortable. And that's kind of like that's the sexual revolution take on sex. Obviously, what is the problem with saying something like, do it when you're ready? Well, that's totally subjective. There's no really like there's no way to, put that, right? So that's why I describe it as sexual anarchy, because you're taking this like rigid moral standard, like this actual rule, and you're basically just saying, do whatever you want. And we'll kind of discourage you from sleeping around too much, which honestly modern culture doesn't even do anymore. But for the most part, don't worry. Maybe honestly, maybe even like some of your parents, like, what was their advice to you? I mean, hopefully you had parents that were like, that told you like the way it's supposed to be. But I'm sure many of your parents basically just said something along the lines of, I'd prefer that you not do it in high school, maybe wait till college, or you know what I mean? But it's all very subjective, and that's kind of the place we're at. Well, what happens is when you have sexual anarchy, which is what it is, when you reject an objective, rigid moral standard on this question, you inevitably will lead to, stuff like this, stuff like, basically a softcore defense of pedophilia, stuff like, I don't know. Well, I don't see what the big deal is with consuming child porn, right? That's exactly what happens when you make the thing subjective, because inevitably, the more and more it goes on, as it keeps getting to this point where sex is not, this big thing. It's just like, oh, if there's something you do, something you enjoy, whatever, subjective thing. Eventually, you will march toward this point where any semblance of past moral standards are totally abandoned on the question of sex. And that's what I think is very important for people to understand, because, we have this tendency to draw the line on pedophilia or child porn, which we should. Obviously, those things are like the most evil of them all. But I think it's also important to recognize that, it doesn't come out of nowhere. Like this type of stuff doesn't come out of nowhere. It is a byproduct of rejecting, the moral standard that Western civilization has been guided by on this question, and moving that towards, just basically whatever you want. Whenever the second you make it subjective, you're opening up the gate for stuff like this. And that's what I want people to understand. Okay. When it comes to questions like gay marriage and other things, right, in this kind of sense of, well, just keep it away from my children. That's never going to happen. They do want to groom your children. That part is true. But that is them doing that to your children literally is a product of, making the entire thing a subjective standard. Okay. Not an objective moral standard, but a subjective one. So with that said, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I do want to display the clip that is kind of the main event of tonight, which is because it's very interesting, right? Now, Vaush knows that even his take on the whole CP question is not popular yet at the moment among his community. Okay. which I'm going to just tell you, it's only a matter of time before it does become that. Because like I said, like we outlined, this is what happens when you allow sexual anarchy. It doesn't move toward a state of more stability. It's going to inevitably keep leading to more and more chaos. Maybe, until the point where, I don't know, God is just like, that's it, end times, Sodom and Gomorrah, this is ridiculous. But until then, you're kind of bound to keep moving toward this state of just chaos when it comes to this stuff. But anyways, Vaush knows for like his own optics purposes that it's not super popular in his own community yet, which he, in this clip, you'll see, and I believe this is a rather recent clip, he tries to run from. He tries to kind of like, I don't know, moderate his stance on it a little bit and kind of like actually be sort of condemning of pedophilia and CP or whatever. The issue is, in comparison to something he said in the past, his attempt to de-incriminate himself actually incriminates himself more. And we'll show you guys that there in a second. So here we go.
Okay. Next question. Simulated child porn, lolly stuff.
I think it's pretty sussy.
What does that mean?
I think that if you have an interest in that sort of stuff, you should definitely be checking yourself as to why,
You should. Vaush. So, this guy asks him, what is your take on simulated CP, right? So basically, not actual, but like cartoons or whatever. And check out what he says. He says that's rather sussy, and he does admit that basically it's kind of you like a person who watches that does so because they're like basically a pedophile, and you'll see that's his take on this right here. Okay,
like the thing that really bothers me about this shit, apart from the fact that anytime you want to look at like hentai on a hentai site, you have to like negate the tag lolly and thus 50% of the site's content. The thing that bothers me is people who pretend there's no relationship whatsoever between like drawn lolly shit and actual attraction to children. Of course there's a relationship between those things. It's ridiculous to pretend otherwise.
Okay, so did you get that? I may be clear. I don't know what lolly is, okay? I'm implying from what he said there that that's basically what he said that is, okay? I don't know exactly what that is. I know it's wicked. I know it's quite disgusting. I know it should be illegal, but I don't know exactly what it is. But according to Vaush, that's it sounds like anime hentai or whatever that's supposed to simulate children, right? And he's given the correct take. That's the correct take, which is if you enjoy that stuff, it's not that there's like no connection between that and what you actually think. People who watch animated porn or whatever watch it because they're like getting the thrill of it simulating real porn or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? So anyone, and I think that's a pretty obvious take, anyone who likes cartoon stuff has some type of yearning inside for that stuff in real life too. Like that's how it goes, And by the way, that's just a consequence of porn. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I don't want to interrupt too much while we do. So again, Vaush has established that lolly, whatever that is pedophilia, and basically people who watch it and enjoy it are pedophiles. So that's what he said recently. Cue the next clip.
So they need to be aware of that, if anything.
Nice right now. We've all jerked it to lolly at some point or another. We've all. Well, you don't have a penis. We have at some point in our lives been going fucking crazy on some hentai site, and we've been fucking stroking as hard and fast as we can, and then after we nut, we go back, look over our history tab, and we go like, oh, jeez. Oh, boy. Some of these girls looked pretty young. Okay, I don't give a fuck.
Take sip for dramatic effect. Curious. Okay. Like I don't even know what to say. First of all, it's not true that all of us have done that. Vaush is kind of coping on that one, is he not? That is a cope. We've all done it. No. I think you're actually just spiritually ill, which is true. That's probably the nicest, but at the same time, maybe meanest thing I can say about Vaush. I mean, he is spiritually unwell. He is spiritually ill. You can tell. And, we will be praying for him, and we'll be praying for his soul. But, Vaush, because you gotta remember what you kind of said on this stuff. So it's very interesting. This old clip right here. He said this. He admits it. I don't think he's being ironic, by the way. I know someone's probably going to say like he's probably just joking. He was clearly trying to be funny. I think it's pretty obvious watching him and knowing who he is that there's definitely truth in that. There's definitely truth in that. There's no running from that. And it's quite clear. Like Vaush, what urges do you have going on, huh? But here's what I want to point out. Here's what I want to point out about this. Okay, is that Vaush is someone who also I remember he did this like pornography debate. I didn't watch it. I only saw like clips of it. But basically, you know, he's a big defender of like regular pornography. In fact, he has gone out and said that he thinks children should watch it. Okay. And he said this in the debate. Someone can go back and look if you don't believe me. Like this has been his take. He literally thinks kids should watch porn. You know, he's a big defender of porn. You know, he's a big porn nationalist. And he's gone out and said that kids should watch porn basically for like sex ed purposes. Like that's basically his take on it. He's like, you know, they should watch it so that they kind of know what they're doing, which like first and foremost, porn is not, I don't know if porn's even a good example of sex ed to begin with. And I think even the concept of sex ed is very wicked, should be totally kept away from children. And like, first of all, I'm anti-sex ed. Like I really am, because, you know, the very point, and you think of when it was taught to you too. When is it first done? In like fifth grade? So when I was in school, we first like had sex ed in like fifth grade. Like we had to do this we all went to this auditorium and we had to like watch boys and girls went separately, but we had to like watch this video on, you know, basically the birds and the bees, which is way too young of an age really to be watching that stuff. So we did that. And then in seventh grade health, there's like a whole unit on that, you know, and you're taught about safe sex and the types of sex and you know, all that stuff. And then in obviously high school health, they really just go all the way on terms of that stuff. And in like college, I know some colleges even like give out condoms, and it's like, you know, there's this the left tries to cope on this by saying that like we're just educating about safe sex. I don't really think that's true. You know, I think in reality what you're doing in many ways is putting like really more so putting the idea of sex into kids' heads and basically like training and like breeding kids to have sex, you know, because let's be honest, like, yeah, it's true. The education system isn't like 100% effective, but I definitely think there is a causal correlation between what is taught in school and what kids en masse in society end up doing. Like, is that an unreasonable opinion? I don't think it is. And the way that you know, in school you should be taught abstinence. That's it. You know, you should be taught abstinence, abstaining until marriage. But Vince, no one's going to do that. Okay, so what? You know, it's like, first of all, I think you underestimate that. I think you underestimate how much a strong, like, moral foundation really can do to people. But of course, abstinence is not taught in school. Prayer is not done in school. And so, of course, you know, you don't have even like the slight number of people who may like be moved a little bit by that. But it's like, even more so, you know, I think at least teaching sex in that context maybe is a little bit discouraging. The way you're taught sex in school in terms of health and whatnot is like, it's more so like you're encouraged to do it. And it's just like, here's how to do it safely, you know? Like I remember in high school health, we were literally taught about like, not just about like normal sex. We were taught about like other forms of sex too. And I think now in California, I'm graduated, but that's where I grew up, right? I think now in California, they even do LGBT sex ed in health class. And it's like, no, I will literally never buy the concept that we're just teaching kids how to have safe sex. First of all, they shouldn't be doing that stuff to begin with, right? They should be practicing abstinence. And, you know, that sort of like moral compromise you think you're making, I think is very miscalculated. Like I really do. But like even beyond that, you know, I think the way it's taught is not, you know, doing that. But even further, right? Vaush thinks that watching porn, right, is like sex ed. And what is porn? Like it's very dramatized, all this. And like Vaush is like, well, kids should watch this stuff to like learn how to have safe sex. Like really is the sex that goes on in porn safe? It's a ridiculous take. But anyway, that's kind of a tangent there. But getting back to what I was saying on the porn thing, I think it's very important to point out, okay, that to our porn watchers, okay, which I think every boy under the age of like 30 basically at this point has seen in their life like for sure. That's the way it is. Like I'm not gonna pretend like I never saw it in my life, or I didn't like used to watch it or whatever in high school. Okay, like I'll be honest, and I think the rest of us can be morally honest too. I have quit. I've been totally clean of it, and it was a very hard process. But we're off it. Our mental state is much better, boys. It is, it's obviously a very tough sin that we had to kick, but we did it, right? We did it, and I know some of you have done it. I'm sure there are many of you, you don't have to admit it. You don't have to admit it. I know it's embarrassing or whatever, but I'm sure there's many of you who struggle with it. Let this be, remember, a warning, right? Let it be a reminder that I think the very kind of point of internet porn basically is to like breed you into very disgusting things, right? And John Doyle talks about this in the porn dissertation or whatever, basically how, that kind of dopamine rush that you get from porn, just like any other drug, increasingly when you keep coming back and back, and it's very addictive, but when you keep coming back and back, your brain's going to demand more, right? It's going to demand more endorphins and dopamine. And so what that's going to lead you is increasingly towards more and more very like extreme, crazy forms of porn. Okay. And I think Vaush, as someone who, clearly is something of a coomer, and probably doesn't have very good impulse control, and probably this is a central part of his life. I don't think it's unreasonable to, and maybe he was just like this all along. Like I said, spiritually unwell, praying for him. But I think that it's definitely a possibility. I know it definitely does happen to a lot of people, that kind of like, increasing demand for endorphins, increasing demand for the high that you get off of watching it leads people to stuff like this, which eventually leads to like forms of CP. Like that's the truth, right? Because I mean, think about what are like the most popular like genres of pornography. Like aren't some of the top genre stuff like very wicked stuff, right? Things like stepsis stuff, right? Like incest, right? Teen, which is basically like 18, 19-year-old girls, but they like, try to portray them as being like younger than that. You know what I mean? So that's like all right off the gate, there's incest and pedophilia. And they're like two of like the top genres of porn, I'm pretty sure. And you have a bunch of other just like wicked, disgusting things or whatever it is, right? So it's like, I think it's pretty clear that's probably what they're trying to drive you to in many ways. I think in many ways, that's what the porn industry is literally leading you towards doing. And that's what they want you to do. And so like, and I think understand when Vaush, in many ways, it's probably a projection, when Vaush encourages kids to watch porn, which he literally does, this is ultimately what he's like trying to drive your kids toward, which is, and again, when we talk about if the top genres of this stuff are like incest and pedophilia, and he's telling kids to watch it, and obviously people who watch certain forms of porn, they get that stuck in their head and they begin to fantasize. That's the point. That's how it works. I mean, what do you think Vaush is doing here? Like in many ways, he's essentially, like basically trying to like groom kids to this or whatever. But anyways, that's what I will say to people who struggle with porn or whatever. Okay. Maybe we'll talk a little bit later on stream about, I can't think like methods on how to quit it, because it's very bad for you. It's very bad. It's genuinely terrible for your brain. It's doing terrible things to your life you might not even realize. But anyways, if you're, and I think most people understand, at least most people in our sphere understand why it's such a big deal. But if you don't get what the big deal is, ask yourself this, like, why is it that the top genres of porn are like literally like pedophilic or incest or whatever? Like, and then, people like move towards that as they continue to watch it. Like, what do you think's going on here? And what do you think Vaush is trying to do? What do you when he tells kids to watch this stuff, what do you think's going on there? It's very interesting stuff. Very bad stuff. I shouldn't say interesting stuff. It's wicked. But anyways, before I continue to stream, while I have everyone still here, be sure to leave a like on the stream. Okay, be sure to leave a like on the stream, whether you're watching on the replay or you're watching live. And if you're new and you're conservative, I don't want any like left-wing Breadtube fans finding this and subscribing to my channel and constantly just leaving stupid comments. But if you're a conservative who found this, because what is this? This is the conservative counter to Breadtube. Okay, this is kind of why I'm doing this, because so many like Vaush and Actual Jake and like all these Hunter Avalon, all these like leftoid YouTubers, they always do this. They always make this content like reacting. Conservatives said, no, we're countering it. Okay, we're striking back. So be sure to leave a like for right-wing Breadtube, which I said in many ways is not Breadtube, right? It's a meat tube. Okay, it's not Breadtube. It's not vegan. No, we are meat tube. Okay, because that's what we are. We're steak tube. All right, red meat tube. That's what we are. We're not Breadtube, but That's what it is. So let's look at chat real quick and then we'll continue here. Courtney says, makes me very suspicious whenever someone pushes kids to expose themselves to these things. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do you think's going on here? You know, and really, like I said, you know, I think it goes far beyond just porn. I think even like something like sex ed, there's an argument to be made there. But it's like, what do you think they're really trying to do? Are they just trying to educate people? And it's like, at least in sex ed, which again, I'm not a fan of the way it's done, but like at least in sex ed, you can give the illusion of we're just trying to teach kids how to practice safe sex or whatever. Porn literally does not teach safe sex or whatever. Okay. The reason why, if anything, Vaush would want kids to watch porn is because he wants them to be exposed to all these like crazy new kinks and all this other like disgusting stuff that they do in porn. It's like, you know, like we know that like it's the stuff in porn is not like the way normal people do that. Okay. Like it's literally dramatized, obviously, but even beyond that, like the things they do is just like, it's like insane. Like it's disgusting. Right. So you can't even like do the illusion when Vaush says kids should watch porn for a sec. You can't even like pretend that that's about teaching safe sex because it's not. Because like objective, like, they don't even use condoms in most porn. Like that's so it's like you can't say that. The only reason why Vaush wants to do that is literally trying to groom kids to be like, you know, just like him, basically, just like him, which is absolutely perverted freaks. And that's what the deal is here. You know, it's disgusting. And we will reiterate, porn should be illegal. It should be. And you know, if I think people understand this take. It's not free speech. It's not protected by the First Amendment. And it's very clear. If it wasn't clear to you before what porn is doing to our society and what the agenda of like the internet porn companies is, well, there you go. There you go. Right. And that's what I want people to recognize too. Like I brought up earlier on terms of the sex question, right? Same thing with porn, right? To the people who are like, well, all other regular forms of porn, whatever. I watch that stuff. Not a big deal, bro. But child porn, yeah, I agree. That's disgusting. You know, like I said, what happened? It's not that really, they're not that different from each other. Like in many ways, right? Obviously, like CP is something that's like another degree of morally abhorrent. But I think it's important to understand that this is simply the result of sexual anarchy, right? You're you know, when you rid yourself of these standards, when you rid society of these standards, like this is where you march toward. You march toward CP, you march toward pedophilia, and that will happen every single time you allow sexual anarchy. And the only solution to that is to reject sexual anarchy in its entirety. In its entirety, you know, you can't return to 10 years ago. You can't. Because 10 years ago will inevitably lead to like now, you know, like how is it, you know, up until like the 1900s, basically, the West stayed fairly consistent on the SQ, right? On the sex question, right? You know, and look, I fully acknowledge that a lot of people definitely didn't all follow it, but at least it was like the way society mostly viewed it. And it was kind of kept out of public eye when it was done. And, you know, it wasn't like, there definitely wasn't this culture of other people encouraging one another to fornicate, right? It was more so that like people, if anything, did that in secret. And then look what you have up until right the 1900s, the seeds start to be planted. You could argue even as far back as like the 20s, but you know, definitely in the 60s, the seeds start to be planted. And then within the span of a few decades, you have ridiculous, insane things you would have never even considered to be imaginable 100 years ago. That's what happens. Like I said, that's what happens when you embrace sexual anarchy. Like that's exactly the way it goes. So, you know, less gets worse, then you become gay. This is true for many people, right? When you keep less, because think about what happens to the porn addict, you know. And look, I'm sure many of you have been through this. You don't have to say you have, but you know you have. Where, you know, when you started watching porn in middle school or high school, whatever, it slowly drove you towards like crazier and crazier things. I don't know if they were necessarily gay, but you know, like, you know what happened there, you know, and that's how this thing works. You know, it is not something to be watched in regulation or just, you know, moderate once. No, it's something you need to be quitting entirely and literally like stop doing it. And I know that's hard. It's very, very difficult, especially when you're already hooked. It's not an easy thing to do. But you know, let Vaush be a reminder to you of how kind of important it is that you do that. So, anyways, we're gonna move gears a little bit here. I guess the sexual revolution really is the theme of this week's stream. But last Monday, I should say, as you know, was Valentine's Day. All right.
Virginity
And I
to-
did want to show you guys this gem. I shouldn't. I say a gem in like a negative sense, but this abomination, I should say, that I found on the Snapchat news feed. Okay, which is a wretched hive, truly, of scum and villainy. Okay, and I know people are gonna be like, "Why are you even on Snapchat?" Okay, I use Snapchat for like actual political purposes. Okay, because it's like one of the few places I can kind of, because there's not really a lot of moderation on Snapchat in terms of like guidelines. So I post like some of my hottest takes on there. Like you guys don't even know this. So if you want to add me on Snap, go ahead. thevincedao, right? I use it for political purposes, okay, which is good, okay, which is good. Leave me alone. But I stumbled across this absolute abomination on the newsfeed I want to talk about. But interestingly enough, I actually saw this on Valentine's Day, which it really added to the irony. But I think really because I was thinking this when I woke up on Valentine's Day, I was like, I think my favorite part of this holiday, which is kind of dumb, in a lot of ways, right? I mean, I think it could be a base concept if it was literally like designed as basically a celebration of like marriage and love, like in a true sense, But instead, it's just cringe and superficial and consumerist or whatever, right? Like I think maybe if you are to keep it, it needs to be a celebration of like married couples, like that's like it's for each other. But it's not what it is. That's not what it is, obviously. And it's just cringe and it's consumerist. And in many ways, it's just more about like hooking up or this concept of just find a Valentine to have a Valentine. You know what I mean? But anyways, my favorite part probably of Valentine's Day, I get a joy out of this. I really shouldn't, but it's very funny to me. Is watching like the girl bosses and the feminists absolutely see the fact that they're single. Like it's hilarious to me because you'll see like just average femoid feminist, right? Girl boss, whatever. She wants her big career, or whatever. On Valentine's Day, they all underhandedly post some type of complaint about how single they are, like, so, oh, by myself today, haha, Many, I've heard many stories of girls just straight up crying on Valentine's Day because they're single. And, it's never strong conservative Christian women that do it. It's always the girl bosses, the spiritually ill, if we want to call them that. But this right here, this thing I saw, and I was thinking about that, and it's quite a sight to behold, to be honest. And then I saw this, which comes from the Snapchat thing called Rich Things. Okay, rich. So you can literally sense the girl boss in the name of like this Snapchat news publication with news, whatever, the Snapchat thing, because it's like Rich Things and it's all about like girls, right? And it's so girl bossy, which is why I found it. I was like, oh wow, I was literally just thinking about this. So it's like Rich Thing. Oh, I'm gonna be rich. I'm gonna be a girl. Yeah. Okay. So, anyways. This is let's just play this. I'll watch this. But basically this story was like, I think the headline was like, I tried to sell my virginity for $2.5 million and then I was unhappy. It was something like that. Let's just watch this. I have many comments to say on this stuff, but this is a little bit of a pivot. But like I said, this is what happens when you allow sexual anarchy, right? Now, like basically also when you combine sexual anarchy with like free market capitalism, unrestricted free market capitalism, this is what you get. You get the commodification. Is that the word? Sex is made into a commodity. Like this is literally what you get. This is how you end up with things like OnlyFans and stuff like this, selling your virginity for money, right? It's very interesting how that works, You combine unrestricted free market capitalism, which we're not for as like true conservatives. We're not for an unrestricted free market. But you take that and you combine it with something like the sexual revolution. Every single time you end up with stuff like this. But let's just watch this. This is quite a sight, guys.
This girl is selling her virginity to the highest bidder, and a businessman offered her $2.5 million to take it. But little did she know that putting her virginity for sale online would be the worst mistake of her life. Well,
little did she know. Oh, she kind of regrets it now. It's sad. It really is sad. Oh, I think that was a mistake now. I guess maybe I can understand it from the angle that she was rather young or whatever, and she's also a female, which there are certain ways in which, you know, joking of course, the judgment there isn't always there, but you know, that's also a case to be made that the stuff like this shouldn't be legal, which in this country it seems to be, which also proves an important point that we'll talk about in a little bit. But check this out.
Well, after that, I lost my family, my friends, everything. I kind of got into a very, very big depression because I was getting death threats.
She went on national TV claiming she wanted 1 million euros to get her parents a new house, but her parents had no idea about her plan.
See, this is, in many ways, this is, like I said, this is what happens when you combine the free market with like this type of stuff, right? This degeneracy straight up, because, you know, you're combining the girl boss feminist culture. I'm going to buy my parents a house. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to make all this money, which should not be, I don't think, the first goal of the Western woman. You know, it really shouldn't be the goal of the Western man either. I mean, I think the Western man obviously should want to be able to provide, right, in that sense for his family, but his first goal shouldn't either be to lust for, you know, for insane wealth or whatever, but especially of the Western woman, you know, there shouldn't be it at all, you know. But you take that and you have that, which is I think a problem in itself. You know, I think the goal of females, of women, should be to, you know, raise children, raise happy, healthy families, you know. But of course, we have the girl boss feminist culture, which is much older than the 2000s or whatever, been around for a while. But, you know, it breeds this kind of idea that, you know, the true point, girls should be ambitious about careers and making money and all that. Okay, but you take that, and like I said, you combine it with sexual anarchy, and what do you end up with? You end up with OnlyFans, and you end up with things like this, and you end up with OnlyFans creators talking about how independent they are or whatever. You know, secretly they're miserable. But I'm a girl boss because I have money and I live alone, but I could pay for my own place. These people are miserable. In many ways, I feel bad for them, you know, but at the same time, you know, they're also leading a vast majority of men and just the rest of society to their same miserable, sinful lifestyle. And so I don't know how, you know, I don't know how sympathetic I necessarily can feel to them, because I think at the same time someone needs to stand up and say, stop this, you know. But
you think they try and stop you?
Would you like?
And sorry, I don't have Snapchat Premium, so I had to screen record this with the ads, unfortunately. But
Yes, of course. My father is a very strict man, and I think that he wouldn't agree.
yeah, I'm sure that's what your parents want. Your parents want you to sell your virginity. And I don't know what country this is, but it seems to be a country with a, I don't know. I don't know if I'd say it's a more like base culture than ours, because if this stuff is like legal to do, then I think it's kind of questionable. So I don't know. But at least her parents here, you know, they're correct. You know, well, and I like the framing too. I like the framing here. My father's a very strict man. He doesn't really want me to sell my virginity to a random guy for $1 million, you know. I like how that's framed as being like a bad thing, kind of implicitly. It's your father is I don't know if he's doing his job, because he clearly didn't raise you with the mindset to like not do this, but at least your father has the right idea in mind on that. I don't know if he's a good, I don't know if he's well, maybe that's what it is. Clearly the relationship with the father is not the best. So I'm not going to say he's a good father, but at least on this thing, he does have the right idea in mind, I guess I'll say. So let's see.
She was shocked when she received an offer for $2.5 million, $1.5 million more than what she asked for. But little did she know that her life was going to change forever, but in the worst way possible.
I literally stayed isolated in home for like 6 months. I didn't want to eat, and I was taking all kinds of antidepressants. I tried to suicide myself regular times.
Selling her virginity turned this girl's life into a nightmare. But before you judge her, you have to know the full story, because it's definitely not what you think.
Before I judge her. Oh, it's not what you think. No, there's not more to the story, dude. She tried to sell her virginity for money. that is like, that's objectively like terrible and bad and a terrible idea, you know. Now, if she truly repents of that and comes to the Lord, then, you know, yes, she like, I will forgive her in my heart or whatever, which you'll watch the rest of the story. I don't think is the case at all, you know, but you're like, you still have, there's no like way to make this spin the situation where there's a little bit of nuance. No, like there's literally just not though. So it's just, just ridiculous.
Her name is Alexandra Catherine, and she was 18 years old when she was contacted by a company called Cinderella Escorts.
Okay, while we watch this ad. Okay, so did you get that? 18-year-old contacted by a company called Cinderella Escorts. Okay, so that presumes, I don't know if prostitution is legal in this country or whatever, but I want you to pay attention to that. To people who say that they think prostitution should be legal, which is like a lot of libertarians, I've even heard some conservative, sex work should just be legal. I don't see what the big deal is. I want people to understand that making prostitution legal doesn't just mean like legal hookers. Like when people go get their hookers off like a back alley street, it's just the cops won't show up or whatever it is, you know, like that's not what legal prostitution means, especially in our economy. What legal prostitution would mean, legalizing it would mean, is literally stuff like this. Literally, you'd have the porn industry and OnlyFans on steroids. It would like, you'd literally have the mass commodification of it. You'd have these big, like this Cinderella Escorts, you'd have these big prostitution companies literally form and basically just recruit your daughters and like 18-year-old women or whatever to, you know, go do this stuff, right? And obviously you already have that with the porn industry. You already have the stuff with OnlyFans, but it would literally be so much worse if it was just for like escort services. Like, can you imagine? And I think the utter black-pilled state of like the blackpilling state of the average college woman, there are literally like so many girls out there that would literally just do this, especially if they were paid enough. And like that's not the prostitution company's fault that the rest of society is just have so many problems. Actually, it kind of is in an extent, because you're literally exploiting it. You're exploiting the sad state of like the modern American woman or whatever. So I don't think that's exactly makes it excusable. But of course, the libertarian, but they're just doing it for money. That's the job of the people in the market, just to maximize profits and to get smart about stuff. You're disgusting and you're wicked. But I think it's important to understand this is what would happen, right? You would have, imagine like OnlyFans. But you would just have like a very big version of that, literally just reaching out to like all these different women about it. And they'd probably, it's not they would. It wouldn't even just be like at 18, you have all these big companies just basically recruiting women to do this for money, right? They would obviously also like groom them before they were 18, basically raise them up to all these sex workers or like sex freelancers or independent contractors or whatever. Like you see, but we just want to do it because it would make prostitution safer. I don't even know what does it even mean to make prostitution safer? But I think that's kind of oxymoronic in itself. But even so, it's important to understand this is what you would get. You would get like mass scale prostitution companies doing this. And consider this, right? What is the barrier to entry in the porn industry? Well, with something like OnlyFans, where literally anyone can just start doing it themselves, right? Obviously, that is like lowered, but still, there is some degree of barrier to entry in porn because, you know, not like a lot of women or whatever who would otherwise do it because they have problems, but they're very uncomfortable about doing it on camera, doing it like publicly on the internet. So there's that. And then also obviously like, you know, you have to be like somewhat attractive, I guess, to do that too, right? Because, you know, obviously that's how that works. It's like, you know what I'm saying? But imagine if you're talking just about like regular prostitution, regular escort services or whatever. Imagine how much lower the barrier of entry is to that, because that literally means anyone can do it. Anyone who's like self-conscious about doing it publicly, doesn't matter. It's all like kind of private. It's never really going to get out that you're doing it, whatever. You know, it's just like a private thing. Nobody has to know about it. You know, all these college women freaking hook up on a regular basis anyway. So at least now they're just doing it for money. Like, you see what I'm saying? So that's barrier to entry number one removed. So making the situation even worse. And it's also going to be more open to everyone because while, yeah, you have to be, I guess, somewhat attractive to do regular porn, there are a lot of guys who will literally sleep with anything, and that is a sad state of the American man, but it's true. And so, like, you also wouldn't have to be even as like good looking or whatever to do this either. Like, you could, like, literally, there is some terrible dude out there in his basement that would basically pay to sleep with anything or whatever. And so, do you see what I'm saying here? Right. So, what the problem you have with the porn industry and OnlyFans and stuff like that, which is already terrible. You legalize prostitution, which a lot of libertarians want to do. I'm pretty sure Joe Jorgensen or whatever openly ran on that platform in 2020. You legalize prostitution, you're not just getting like I don't know, just like no one's gonna no one's gonna notice. It's just like a technicality change. No, you're literally gonna get mass scale prostitution companies out there doing this. That's what you're gonna get. And that's your free market. And in many ways, I would argue that's what libertarians want. They want the mass corporatized grooming of 18-year-old women, and in many cases, women younger than 18. That is the libertarian utopia or whatever they want. One of the many reasons I'm not a libertarian, but probably one of the most convincing ones, if I'm being honest. No, I don't want the mass corporatized grooming of young women. Okay. But it's just important. I want to point that out because that is kind of like a lot of liberals are for legalizing prostitution. Libertarians are too. I've even heard some conservatives basically make that case. First of all, I think it's just immoral anyway. You should not be like legalizing immorality, especially when it's already illegal. Like that's the standard. Like it just seems ridiculous to begin with. But it's also important to point out that's the truth of how it would look. And it looks like something like this, Cinderella escorts. So, anyways, before I continue, if you're sending chats right now and you want me to read them when we go to Q&A or whatever, be sure to send in a super chat or whatever. But Sam Matson actually just sent one. He says some blue states are thinking of legalizing. I know. Nevada already legalized it, which is of course they did. It's Nevada. It's just the state of Vegas and all that stuff. I see. I don't know how it goes in Nevada, but I'm sure that many women are like recruited to do it too. It's not especially since it's more open. I mean, if you've ever been to the Las Vegas Strip, I think it's pretty obvious that's what happens. It is. It's way more prominent and way more. We're told biblically for a reason to surround yourself with other believers and be very careful about who you fellowship and surround yourself with because, people who are sinful will lead you to sin or whatever. But that's like, it's very true though, too, because, and I think it's very important to understand this when we talk about, well, it shouldn't just be freedom, individual choice or whatever. It's like when everyone around you, and yes, some people have very good willpower, but let's be honest, there's a difference between, being surrounded by people who discourage you from doing something versus being surrounded by people in a culture who encourages you to do something. And when you're surrounded with a culture where this is just normal, whatever, what happens? People are more likely to follow norms, right? No matter what they are. And so it's like, yeah, if you have a culture that is very traditional on the question of sex and have a culture that is very modernist on the question of sex, obviously in both cultures, some people will defy either one. But the truth is most people will follow the norm. Like that's the truth. That's the reality. So it does matter who you surround yourself with, what culture you surround yourself with. But anyway, Sam Matson says some blue states are thinking of legalizing. I'm sure they are. How long before Republicans cave? I'll give it about 15 years, maybe. I don't know. It's going to happen though, because it is true the Republican Party is getting better in many aspects, slowly but surely, right? We're kind of America First as a concept is kind of working its way in. You see it a little bit, like you see Congress people and stuff kind of hinting at immigration moratorium, whatever, like stuff like that. But one of the most blackpilling things I think you've seen over the past decade, and you can kind of notice this, like you go look at the Republicans of like 2000, 1990 versus now, the influence of like Christianity within the party has definitely dwindled a lot, especially of like the Southern Baptist Church, like the evangelicals or whatever, right? It's definitely and even from those people themselves, like the Southern Baptists or whatever, you notice a lot now, they're a lot more like liberal or libertarian when it comes to cultural issues. So I think because that's probably like the main pushback, right, would be from like the religious right, who traditionally has kind of held the party firm on social issues. But obviously you've noticed over the past few decades, that kind of religious moral right that you know, economic things, whatever, but they've always been kind of like the social cultural warriors. They definitely have kind of declined, right? And so I think the more that you notice them go away, even if we get like better trade policy, better immigration stuff, you're going to get closer also to stuff like legal weed, obviously, which a lot of Republican states have already done, and then of course stuff like legal or decriminalized prostitution. So it is going to happen. I really think so. Unless we really fix things, you know, obviously, you know what I mean? Sex work is work. God, I hate you. First of all, it's capital G. Secondly, you know, I'm not gonna say it. I'm praying for you.
Told her that she could sell her virginity for 1 million euros. But when she put her offer online,
talk about the Catholic Church. Well, no, the reason I mentioned the Southern Baptist Church is because the Catholic Church doesn't have the same influence historically in the Republican Party that like something like the evangelicals have. You know, the Catholic Church, I wouldn't say the Catholic Church, but American Catholics historically have more so been Democrats. Like that's okay. I know people get mad, but that's a statistical truth. And so that's why I brought up the Southern Baptist and evangelical influence specifically, because that in terms of their influence in Republican politics, it's more so the kind of evangelicals and like Baptists that historically in the Republican Party did that. Okay. Now, if the Catholics want to step up their game, then let's do it. But like, just point, that is the truth. That is the truth. Okay. Historically, American Catholics have leaned way more towards Democrats, and that's statistically real.
she got an offer for $2.5 million instead. And
no, it's not wrong. It's historically accurate. Okay. And I understand a lot of them are like weak Catholics, fake Catholics, or whatever. They just like self-proclaimed Catholics. But I'm talking, tell me when the Catholic Church has had any significant degree of political influence on the GOP. It doesn't exist. It's not true. It's not historically accurate. Okay. You can argue for a change. I'm fine with that. I think we do need, the influence of, all churches in general. And I think there's kind of a political gold mine that's being sat on with American Catholics, but it's the truth that hasn't historically been true. So you can call me all wrong all you want. It's not really the historical truth. Okay. Now, like I said, if they want to get better, then let's do it. But that's the yes, it's true. Southern Protestants are the backbone of the GOP. Like that's the truth. And that's why I mentioned their churches specifically, because when you talk about things like gay marriage or whatever, back when the GOP was actually good on that question, why was that? Because of it was more so because of like Southern Protestants than it was Catholics. Like that's reality. Okay. So you can get mad at that. I'm not trying to like attack Catholics. I'm just saying that's the reality of the political situation that has historically been true. And you cannot deny that. Look at the statistics, and it's not just like a modern phenomenon. Historically, Catholics have been very close with the Democratic Party. Like that's the truth. Now, as the Democratic Party becomes more and more radical, hopefully we can peel them off. But if I'm going to talk about the waning influence of the evangelicals, you have to point that out. So, oops, now I resumed way back where I wanted to go. All right.
Turn into hell. It turns out this man called Alexandros told her that she could sell her virginity for 1 million euros. But when she put her offer online, she got an offer for $2.5 million instead. And that's when her life turned into hell. It turns out this man called Alexandros runs Cinderella escorts from his mother's basement. And he tells young women that they can become millionaires by simply getting intimate with a stranger for one night. Then he would use these girls for publicity for his illegal business. Hello.
So it is an illegal business. Okay. All right. Well, at least it's illegal in this country, but I think it's important to understand the model there still. And if it is legal, that's gonna be, what's gonna happen there. Okay. The reddest county in my state is almost an exclusively Catholic county. Way back in the day, it was blue. Oh no, yeah, I know. The Catholics are coming around. But yes, historically, Catholics have been very close with the Democratic Party. They've almost had something of a political machine. That is back when the Democratic Party was not really what it is today. You could even argue, there's even some arguments you can make that the Democratic Party back in the day was like better than the Republican Party in some ways, right? It was kind of like the more working class party, whatever. But yeah, that's true. That's true. But people get mad. They don't understand when I think I'm trying to attack Catholics. I'm not trying to attack Catholics. I'm just saying like that's the truth. If you want to talk now, Catholics are coming over, but there's still a lot of like Democrat Party loyalty from like your grandfather, grandparents, whatever, like from that, you know what I mean? Like my great grandpa was an Italian Catholic in Connecticut back in the day, and he used to be a Democrat because that was like the working class party for like the Italian Catholics, you know. He became a Republican later in his life, which is a transformation I'm sure we will see over time. But you know, yes, Southern Protestants were the backbone of the GOP. Like you can't deny that, guys. I don't know why people are getting so mad about this.
Giselle, I want to sell my virginity at Cinderella Escorts because I want to be able to pay for my school and go traveling in the future.
Alexandros then human traffics these women to Athens to be slaves, making them work in brothels and paying them very little money. Alexandros used Alexandra as a publicity tool, made up the whole story about selling virginity for money. Trick her to appear on TV.
This is true. This is true. Okay, not saying it's right, but it's true. That is true.
Yes, I didn't sell my virginity. It's completely true.
He asked her to promote his illegal business in exchange for fame, and he told her that no one in the country would ever find out. But in just 2 hours, her video went viral.
It was very disturbing for me, and it really ruined my life forever.
She was bullied, she lost friends and family, and she almost committed suicide. But luckily, Alexandra finally worked.
I love, it's not good that she was getting suicidal, obviously, that's terrible. But the framing that, like, painting the people in her personal life as like the bad guy or whatever, like these overjudging people. No, like they're actually trying, maybe she doesn't understand this. Maybe she will one day. They were actually trying to do the right thing for her. Okay. Like that's the truth. Because they probably really did love her, and this is something very important to understand, because very often, and you get this debate as a Christian all the time too. People say this, it's like, aren't you supposed to love everyone? Aren't you supposed to love gay people or whatever? It's like, what do you think love is? You're right. Like we do love our neighbor, right? We do love thy neighbor, but love does not mean shallow, vain tolerance. See, that is exactly the product of like modernist society and like this liberal concept of love. Oh, love someone means you say sweet, nice things to them, and it's kind of just this shallow tolerance for everything that they do. That's not love. You could say it's lust. You could just, I don't know what you call it in many aspects, but it's not love. To truly love someone, you must be willing to, frankly, hate and condemn that which, is evil, and which makes them do evil, and which ruins them, right? If you love someone, then you have to truly want the best for them, And so that the person who truly loves another person is not going to say, oh, that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. Go ahead. I support you. That's not love. Like, in fact, that's the opposite of love. I'd argue in many ways that's hate. That's contempt for that person. If you truly love someone, you cannot sit idly by and watch them basically destroy themselves. You don't really love that person, But we're taught, that's what most like liberals and atheists, whatever, seem to think love is nowadays. You're supposed to love gay people, which means just let them sit around and do whatever they want. Like, that's not what Christian love is. I think even in a very honest sense, I don't think that's what anyone deep down thinks love is. I think when they say that, they're not even really listening to themselves, or they're being superficial in themselves, But it's just like the framing. Whoa, but these people around her were doing such bad things, and no, like they love her, and that's why they were doing that. But nobody seems to understand this, And this is, it's just insane, and a lot of women nowadays are the same exact way, they basically, their boyfriend will just say very shallow, superficial, sweet things to them, and it's just like, oh, he loves me so much. No, like that's not how it works. You know, my friends love me so much, they just give me shallow compliments. Yeah, I know that's what you want. That's what you want to hear. Someone who really loves you isn't always going to tell you what you want to hear, and that's the truth.
Got from that nightmare. She found the love of her life and she lost her virginity to him. Now she has a message for all the girls.
Let's go. Let's go.
Alexandra finally woke up from that nightmare.
Monster
she
Z.
found the love.
Let's get a. Everyone put the letter Z in the chat. Let's put the letter Z in the chat from Mr.
Of her
Z.
life and she lost her virginity to him. Now she has a message for all the girls.
Don't jump in anybody's arms for not selling but losing your virginity. Just do it with the right guy at the right time.
Let's rewind. I got distracted.
She found the love of her life and she in just 2 hours her video went viral.
It was very disturbing for me and it really ruined my life forever.
She was bullied, she lost friends and family, and she almost committed suicide. But luckily, Alexandra finally woke up from that nightmare. She found the love of her life and she lost her virginity to him. Now she has a
I bet they weren't married. I bet she lost her virginity to him very early in that relationship, as a matter of fact. But it's like, oh, the story has a happy ending. Yeah, I hope it does, like eventually. But you know, let's see. Let's watch the end of this.
Message for all the girls.
Don't jump in anybody's arms for not selling but losing your virginity. Just do it with the right guy at the right time, because that's an immense breakout in your life.
See, like I said, like I brought up earlier in the stream, that's still a problematic statement in itself, right? Just do it with the right. That's considered like the modern. It's almost considered the traditional stance in society nowadays. It's like, just do it with the right guy. Do it when you're ready. You know, don't rush into it. That's considered. Is that not considered the more conservative traditional stance in our society today? Like that's the more traditional thing to say, which is kind of sad. But you know, it's like. But that's still a form of sexual anarchy, like I brought up earlier, right? That's still making this entire thing a very like subjective, however you feel type of thing, you know, rejecting the objective moral standard that civilization has traditionally been guided on by this question. And basically, like I said earlier in the stream, opening the doors to sexual anarchy. Basically, this means whatever we want it to mean. It is whatever we want, essentially. That will inevitably lead to people just saying, well, why not sell it for money? Why not just do it with whoever I do it as soon as possible because it feels good, and just do it with the 7,000 million people, right? Like inevitably, you're going to get that the second you start opening up the doors for sexual anarchy. Like, that's the truth, you know? So exactly. You are ready when you're, and the thing is, this is an objective standard, right? It's a concrete way in which to say this is ready to, this is when you went down to do it, you know? And it is the correct way too, by the way. But like I said, the second you just say, well, it's just a certain stage in the relationship, just whenever you personally feel like you're ready. Yeah, well, your flesh wills against your spirit. So your flesh will always feel like you're ready. It's not true, right? But it's just like, oh, when you do it whenever you think is kind of the right time. Yeah, like I said, sexual anarchy inevitably will just get worse and worse. Like it'll move towards a greater state of anarchy, not a greater state of stability. And so you end up with people selling it. You end up with, like, you know, the what we talked about earlier in the stream, CP and stuff like that. Video Maker says, Vince, I did read your last super chat. What do you mean? I literally did read it. It's this one right here. Yeah, I read that. I did read that. But what were we saying earlier? What were we just talking about? So yeah, like I said, you'll always end up like at this point. Okay. And that really is the truth. It really is the truth. And, you know, I think in many ways you can make an argument too that society, and this is the sad part, society basically traps you into it in many ways, because, you know, I understand why it's very hard for a lot of people. And it's really the fact that it's like, you know, you're expected to go through, like, biologically speaking, your late teens and your early 20s, if I'm not mistaken, early 20s up until like your mid 20s, right? And don't get me wrong, I believe that's when like you're the most fertile, right? That's when people's sex drive is the highest. That's when they're most fertile. But you're basically trained by the marriage culture in our society away from getting married at that age. Like, is that not true? You know, like traditionally speaking, by the time people were like 19 years old into their early 20s, whatever, you know, they were married. They were already, you know, married. Like, that's how traditionally it always was, you know. And obviously now you look at our marriage culture today, it's basically the opposite. It's like virtually impossible to even get married at that age. Now, I think you can basically vindicate that it's correct, right? Because, okay, if the standard, which is biblical and which I believe, but, you know, if the standard is, hey, sex is something you're supposed to do within the context of marriage, and kind of your sex drive, and in order to make children, by the way, and your sex drive and your fertility is the highest around kind of like 20, like that's kind of like the magic number, right? And your sex drive is basically highest around this point, and you're supposed to, you know, have sex in the context of marriage, then like obviously this is kind of the right age that you're supposed to be married, right? You see what I'm saying here? But now, of course, you have the society where, you know, it's like you get married young in today's society if you're married at the age of like 28 or something. Like if you get married in your late 20s, that's considered young. Like I think my parents were married in like their like 29, 30 or something like that. But like my like older cousins and my uncles and stuff, my younger uncles, stuff like that, the millennials that I know, you know, a lot of them weren't married until like literally their mid to late 30s. Like I know a lot of family members and stuff like that. And I'm sure you guys have witnessed this the same way, you know? And so it's like, the reason, well, part of why it's so like the standard of saying wait till marriage is so hard for a lot of people, which I recognize that it is precisely because of the fact that marriage culture basically leaves your most like high sex drive, fertile years of your life, basically says don't get married at that age. Right. And so in many ways, you're kind of basically trapped into this because people have such like a strong drive to do it at this age, you know, and traditionally it was just like, OK, get married and then you can do it and then you have kids or whatever. Now it's like, don't get married at that age. And so a lot of people are kind of stuck with like, what are they going to do? You know, because like biologically speaking and like by God's design or whatever, the age that you're told not to get married at is actually the age that you're supposed to get married at and supposed to procreate at. Right. And so like, obviously, I think it becomes very difficult for people. And like I said, I think that's part of the way they trap you into this culture. Like inevitably, you have to get stuck into sexual anarchy, hookup culture. I mean, you don't have to, you know what I mean? But it's much easier to trap people in when, you know, their most fertile years of their life, they can't get married or whatever. And so it's like, what else is there to do but sleep around and kind of engage in so-called sexual anarchy, right? Like that's kind of what you do. But okay, Bust the Bus says I get married 2 months ago, sorry, at the age 24. Let's go. Congratulations. Can we get congratulations in the chat? We love to see it. Congratulations. Very epic, very epic. We're very proud of you. And good job on breaking you know, I don't know, the norm or whatever. Good job. Because that's what you're supposed to do, you know. But you know, look at society. It's like, first of all, from 18 to 22, you have to go to college, right? Most people used to just get out of high school and work. Okay, 18 to 22, you have to go to college. And it's like, you can't really get married in college. But then even like beyond college is like, okay, I got to go start my career, maybe go to grad school, all this. Next thing you know, like people aren't even getting married to like their late 20s. And then beyond that, I don't know, we just have this like not strong pro-marriage culture. And so inevitably, a lot of people aren't getting married to like their 30s, late 30s, whatever, you know, and it's like, what are they supposed to do through all those years, you know? It's like, yeah, technically you are just supposed to resist that entirely. But, you know, I'd argue like for many people, it's just like part of the reason why they're so like unable to do it or whatever is because, like I said, that's the age that you're supposed to be getting married at, you know? So that's part like, yeah, not having sex until marriage nowadays sounds crazy to a lot of people. I understand that. But I think it's important also to understand that historically speaking, people used to get married a lot younger. And so that age where you're like, you know, the most, you know, have the highest hormonal sex drive, most fertility or whatever. And now you're like, how am I supposed to not have sex at this age? Well, the answer is it's not that you're not supposed to. It's that you're supposed to get married at that age. You see what I'm saying? But they make it impossible. It's very sad. It's very sad. So it's like I said, you get trapped into this culture of sexual anarchy in many ways, you know? And it's not to say that people shouldn't resist the temptation still. Like, yeah, you have to. That's what you got to do. But like, you know, you do see how they set it up so that it's very hard for people to do so, you know, in many ways. And then, of course, you breed this whole culture around and combine it all together. Like, they have the system set up to basically lead as many people to hell as possible. Like, that's absolutely true, which is sad and which is not good. But it's it's we don't like it. We hate to see it, folks. We hate to see it. So let's see. Oh, we got Beezy. We got Beezy or Beezy. How do I even? I just call you Beezy in my head. Am I saying that correctly? But the guy with the epic Bees comics. Shout out Beezy. I'm just calling you Beezy. That's what I call you in my head. That's the first time I've actually said your name out loud. Is that even like your thing? So but in conclusion here, we'll do Q&A or whatever. But on the Vaush thing, on all this stuff, in conclusion here, folks, it's very important to recognize, yes, something like selling your virginity for $1.5 million seems crazy. Yes, something like what Vaush is saying about the CP thing sounds crazy. Of course it does. But it's also important to understand, like I said, that this stuff does not come out of nowhere. And you cannot just stand here and say, like, well, I guess it was okay when it was done more moderately or whatever, or back when children weren't involved in it, because like I said, what is it the product of? It's the product of sexual anarchy. It's the product of removing objective moral standards, which come from, guess what? This is not a Bible. This is my prayer journal, but still you get the point, right? You get the point. When you remove those and inevitably you just basically say it's subjective, do whatever you want, you're always going to come to that point. And part of the reason why it will always drive toward the point of literal insanity is because, what is sex, right? It's probably like our strongest biological drive. We have this kind of like fleshly desire, of course, to do it and have it, like we all do, obviously, and so it's like when you're basically kind of liberating us on that and just saying like, okay, do it, inevitably people are going to drive closer and closer to their fleshly instincts. You see what I'm saying? So like it will, like enabling sexual anarchy will always lead towards Vaush or this girl we talked about or whatever. And that's very important to understand, and that's true of things like porn. That's true of hookup culture in general. That's obviously true of LGBT stuff. We always talk about how did LGBT end up to pedophilia? Well, the traditional standard, what? Relationships, man and a woman. Marriage, man and a woman. You get rid of that, you're going to end up with eventually, it's whatever that love is, whatever the heck. Love is love. Love is whatever the heck you want it to be. It's always going to end like that. I think that's very important, very key, very crucial for people to understand. The slippery slope is very real. And, that's all there is to say. Vaush is crazy, obviously. But don't be surprised if 10 years from now, everyone sounds like Vaush. Everyone on the left sounds like Vaush. Give it about 20, 30 years, everyone on the right will probably sound like him too. It's very sad, but it's true. So the answer is not to say, well, we're going to draw the line on pedophilia, because obviously that is a line, but we need to be drawing the line before that, right? Because we need to be drawing the line so far back to where we don't even march to that point. It's like you keep ceding ground on all this stuff, and you keep okay, that's a perfect example. You keep ceding ground, resources, territory, etc., and all this stuff. When you finally get to that point of pedophilia, what do you have to even defend yourself with? That you've let them march all the way down here and destroy everything. What do you have left to even defend this moral line that you're now going to draw? You don't have anything. And so inevitably, it's true that the left will be able to like normalize pedophilia and basically groom a bunch of children and all that stuff, because when we fail to stop them for that, they're basically just, it's like they keep gaining all these resources or whatever. Just think about like a battle game. By the time they get to this point, they're such a big monstrous giant that it's like we barely have the power to even defend them here, right? So we should have been trying to defend them from the start before the monster kept getting bigger and bigger and eating more and more stuff to where it's just, you know what I'm saying? It's true. It's true. With that being said, guys, if you're watching on the live replay, don't go anywhere, because we'll do some other stuff. I don't know. We could do Q&A, or we could watch something else. I don't know. We'll figure that out in a second. But if you're watching on the replay, I'll be posting the full Q&A or whatever we do after this point in the stream on the members tab. So be sure to do that. But if not, be sure to like this video. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. Be sure to like the video. Subscribe if you're new. You want an epic conservative counter to the Breadtubers and whatnot. Great conservative channel. I'm sure the people in the live chat can 100% verify that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if not, I'll see you guys later. Or if so, I should say, see you guys later. Alpha moves only. God bless and peace.
In leaving it, I do so with this prayer. May God's grace be with you in all the days ahead.
He is a globalist, and we are nationalists. He believes in some Pax Universalis. We believe in the old republic. He would put America's wealth and power at the service of some vague new world order. We will put America first. So today we call for a new patriotism, where Americans begin to put the needs of Americans first. For a new nationalism, where in every negotiation, be it arms control or trade, the American side seeks advantage and victory for the United States. And the people of this country need to recapture our capital city of Washington from lobbyists and registered agents of foreign powers who are hired to look out for everybody and everything except the national interest of the United States. And our Western heritage is going to be handed down to future generations and not dumped onto some landfill called multiculturalism.
All right, I get it. Everyone's been saying no, you never do an end of stream scene anymore. What, you're entitled to that? I do it. It's not a mandatory thing here. Okay, I have to do that. Okay, it's part of it. I've ran out of like funny things to do. Okay, I really have. I don't know. Like part of me really wants to do that famous Bill O'Reilly thing, where he's like, "Well, do it live." But you know, some people, it's you know, I don't know. I don't know if I'm supposed it to be good if I verbally recited that entire thing. So we're not gonna do that. Maybe we'll do that at some point. We're not gonna do that right now. But you know, I will give you something. This is unironically not going to be funny or ironic. Okay, so if that's what you're looking for, I really am sorry. But for those still on stream, I guess I'll share this since everyone wants to end the stream scene. Okay, and everyone was like, "Well, that was so white pilling. I like that." Okay, well let me finish the job for you if you're still here. Okay. I want to share actually, this is as of recent basically been like my favorite Bible verse. It comes out of the later chapters of Revelation. Is actually Revelations 21:4. Okay, and so this is describing obviously heaven and obviously the new heaven and the new earth. And the reason why I feel like for me this has been such a powerful verse for me recently is obviously because when you look at the state of the world, we all know the story. Like I always talk about how to avoid getting blackpilled, and I tell you that this is how, right? But it's so let me just read from this. Okay, so we'll actually read 21:3 as well, so we can get the whole thing. But this is describing obviously heaven and the new heaven and new earth. And I heard a loud voice saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God." Obviously, but this 21:4 is really the verse I like. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, and neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And it's so true. It's literally so true. Is that remember that? Or remember what awaits you if you hold strong, if you keep faith. Remember what awaits you in eternity. Obviously, on one hand, part of us just really wants to avoid eternal agony and eternal suffering. I think on the other hand, though, there truly is something beautiful about what does await us in the next life. I mean, just internalize that. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Imagine that, right? Imagine God literally wiping your own tears away, and death shall be no more, And neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. So true. So true. Okay. With that being said, good night, guys.